So good evening, everyone. Cloud Native Media number 19. Wow, wow, and just look at that view, isn't it amazing? So who was at the last one? Whoa! And who's a first timer at Cloud Native Media? Yeah, got a few. Yeah. So it's been a while. What's been happening? I'm unemployed. Yeah. It's been it's given me a lot to think about. I say unemployed. I mean I'm an independent media consultant. But it's given me a lot to reflect on, a lot to think about, very, very thought-provoking. I'm never going to be rude about a lift again. The lifts here are amazing, aren't they? They're like out of Star Trek. I mean, you don't even know where you're going. So, what do we got coming up tonight? We've got Richard, who's going to talk about giving frames URLs. I mean, it sounds amazing. I mean, I totally get it. I'm really looking forward to that. And then later on, David and I are going to do a little talk about the future and how scary it is, and all of the things that we might need to think about going forward into that future. And then we are going to the pub. It's a new pub. We're not going to the One Ton because that's a little bit far from here. We're going to the Craft Beer Co., which I am reliably informed is one of the places that sells the most expensive pints in London. But you don't have to buy the expensive beer, right? You can buy cheaper beer. Okay, it's literally, I mean, look, the directions are the same as we had before. It's literally just take a left. It's over the road, over the crossroads. You can't miss it. And we'll try and put the map up again at the end if you need it. So, Cloud Native Media. Let's refresh who we are, why we're here. So, I need to not trip over this wire as well. It's a bit not used to having wires. So, an informal group. Technology, media, TV, video, audio, radio, and we share technical, business, organizational, practical information about putting real media workflows in the cloud. We have a code of conduct. It is an important thing. I will leave you a moment to read that. Thank you very much. What's cloud? Computing infrastructure dynamically defined and controlled by software. It's my definition. It's a new slide with a new graphic, but it's still the same definition. What's cloud native? It's doing things differently, because why would you do things the same with a new technology? What would be the point in that? You're going to do things differently in a cloud native way to make sure that you get the best value from your activities. Why do we hold these meetups? Well, we want people to collaborate from different disciplines, because not everyone can know everything. And that's why we've got people in here from across the spectrum in terms of roles, in terms of industries, in terms of skills and disciplines. So please, do get together, do network, do have a conversation with someone new. You may not get another opportunity. We want you to subscribe, follow, like, smash the bell, all of that kind of stuff. So please do that. And we have future events where you might be able to come and speak. So please do come and speak at a future event. You can go to cnm.live/speak, and you can read a little FAQ and fill in a form, and we'll sort you out a slot at a future event. So me and David are the organisers. We've been doing this for, a couple of years now. 3 years almost. Hey, it's been quite a journey, and look where we've ended up. So happy with that. And we've got some sponsors, and I think first and foremost, the awesome sponsor of the night for this amazing venue, Comcast, is Matt around. Yeah, do you want to come up and say a little quick word about Comcast? Try not to trip over the wires.
Hi. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for everybody for coming. Thanks for getting rid of the pizza. It's good start to the evening. Sorry it was a little bit chaotic, but trying to carry X number of pizzas upstairs is not the easiest thing to do. But anyway, really appreciate your time. Really appreciate you coming. So Comcast have been working a lot with Sky more recently, as you know, since the acquisition. And Scott reached out to me and said, "Hey, we're going to be hosting some events with Cloud Native. Would you be interested in hosting it here?" So, trying to make some really good use of the space. And yeah, hope you enjoy the evening. Really appreciate the time. And yeah, leave you to it.
Awesome, thanks, Matt. Ateliere is our new sponsor. Very, very pleased to have Ateliere on board with these events. Andy, is Andy around? Oh yeah, there you are. You're right there.
Thank you very much. I have the easiest presentation of the night because what I'm going to do is congratulate two people, and that's George and Monsi, who have set up the AV setup, the streaming setup and the in-room setup for us today, despite numerous challenges, and they've made it work. So congratulations to them both. So don't applaud me, please applaud George and Monsi. There you go. They've been working extremely hard, I can attest to that. So Ateliere is a software company that sits right in that juncture between broadcast technology and cloud technology. And we'd love to tell you more about it, but we'll do that over the course of the next few events and not bore you today. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you, Andy. Who we got next? Techex, Russell. Have a quick word about Techex. Sponsor from the very beginning. It's great to have them still on board.
Hey there, hey everybody. Thank you for coming, it's great to see you. Great to be in a new venue, it's fantastic. So thank you to Comcast. And thank you for all of you who are here tonight. You know, Techex, we've been around since before even IP video was a thing as a company. So we've seen lots of technology come. In some cases, it's gone as well. But some of it stuck around, like transport streams that'll never go away, it would seem. But more importantly, more interestingly, we've seen a lot of technology which has kind of bubbled up, but it's been a little bit ahead of its time. And I think nowadays, with the plethora of cloud and software and even neural chips, we're in a time when technologies that we always wanted to happen are happening. And we like nothing better than to move video or to transform video in a new and interesting way. And this is exactly the types of things that, and ideas that are, you know, are here in this room. And that's why we're really proud to be sponsoring this. And thank you for everything. If you're watching online, then you better like and subscribe. Isn't that right, Paul?
Thank you, Russell. And finally, we have David with LiveWire.
Don't be the first person to trip over. Thank you very much. Last sponsor, someone say headlining. Yes, so at LiveWire, keep it brief, but basically we partner with companies to help them build better cloud infrastructure. So if that's something you're interested in talking to me about, it's myself and my colleagues here, so please reach out to us after and later in the networking part of the event. Thanks very much.
Awesome, thank you very much indeed. We've got a community diary. I will get here so I can actually see it. So we've got a lot of events coming up in the next few days and weeks. Tomorrow night, City UK down at Ravensbourne. I think David's speaking at that. Who's going to that? Probably quite a few people here. Yeah, see you there. I'll be there. You know, notwithstanding, well, bad things happening, I will be there. Next Tuesday, I will be tripping over the wire again. I'm going to hold this up. Next Tuesday, London Video Technology are resurrecting. Yeah, who's going to that? Yeah, a few. Yeah. So they'll be back. That's Phil and that team running their meetup. So I think Nigel Meggett's speaking at that from the BBC. So that should be interesting. There's a DTG event on Wednesday next week. And then we're rolling into NAB. So NAB's only a couple of weeks away now. Anyone going to NAB? Yeah, a few people going to NAB. Good luck. Enjoy it. I won't be there. I can't. I'm an independent media consultant. I don't have budget for that sort of thing. So 30th of April, AWS London Summit. So on the evening of 30th of April, we are hoping to have a cloud native media event of some sort, and we will let you know more details about that. So that will be after the AWS Summit, probably somewhere in the region of Excel. So more to come on that. And then, of course, in May, it's MPTS, and then we've got a couple more cloud native media events coming up in the summer. And then IBC will happen when IBC happens, because that happens every year. And so for those of you who need to make a note of the future cloud native media events. They're all up here. Or you can go to cnm.live/dates. Very easy, not difficult at all. You can find those dates. They're all listed there. Our roster for the rest of the year. News. Everyone's favorite section, the news section. It's always good. AWS have got some new toys, as they seem to have all the time. Media Connect Gateway now supporting source-specific multicast. What does that mean? That means that if you have source-specific multicast in your data center, you can use AWS Media Connect Gateway by deploying that on a node in your data center to send that multicast stream up to AWS, up to Media Connect. So that's a useful feature. People have been asking it for a while. I'm aware of that. A couple of media tailor updates with pre-transcoded ads and some log management stuff. So interested if you're using media tailor as a service that allows you to embed ads in streams. So things like HLS streams going out. So what else has happened? Channel 5. I don't know if you've seen this. So Channel 5. Back in the day when they launched, they were called Channel 5, and then they became 5, F-I-V-E, after a few years, and then they became Channel 5 again, and now they've become 5 again, but instead of F-I-V-E, it's just the number 5 now. I guess like Channel 4, they've taken the interesting decision to merge their VOD brand with their main channel brand, so it's just all called 5. And so this is so there's no equivalent of ITVX or iPlayer or anything like that anymore. It's all about just 5 and just like that with Channel 4. So that seems to be a trend that is ongoing. I think UK TV is sort of in that space with the U brand. So we'll see how that pans out. Technicolor, very sad. Last week, it was a week before, we lost Technicolor. I think nobody saw that coming. It's obviously a lot of people out of work because of that, a lot of very talented VFX people. I mean, this guy at the Mill said, what did he say? Incompetence at the top on LinkedIn. Hey, look, I don't know whether that's true. I think being at the top is a tough gig. And so I suspect, and you know, one of the things that David and I are going to touch on in our talks a little bit later on is you know, maybe some of the challenges that we've got in large legacy organizations. And yes, finally in the news, so Max Foch, who's a YouTuber, he played in a charity football match, and he managed to shred his yellow card on the pitch when it was issued to him. He had a shredder concealed in his kit, which he'd run around with all match, and when he got given a yellow card, he pulled out this shredder and put the yellow card through the shredder. So it's a great video if you want to watch it, but it's certainly an interesting stunt and yeah, a lot of fun. So we are back to cloud native news. David, are you ready to roll? Not going to shred your card?
No shredding. I'll have to click there.
Yeah.
Hello, and welcome to this year's first edition of Cloud Native News. Thank you very much. Woohoo! Right, so we'll run through one of the big themes that's happening within the cloud native space and generally in terms of cloud infrastructure. Has been this ongoing saga with VMware's vSphere licensing model. And there's been a lot of fallout around this, and I've done a couple of presentations around this previously around a number of companies who rely on VMware for their on-prem or their hardware-based infrastructure are finding it difficult to swallow the costs. So there has been a real budding market that's come back up again for people for open source technology. Stack came foundation. They're joining the Linux Foundation, which is the same as what CNCF, Kubernetes, and a number of other big technologies or cloud infrastructure technologies are under. And so they're hoping that this will help spark a wider community engagement. I think it's an interesting move, and I think you'll see a lot of businesses starting to build offerings around this now that it's under a foundation. And coming up with VMware migration stories. Yeah, not great. This week, a GitHub supply chain attack spilled secrets from 23,000 projects. I don't know if people saw this. Should have done. So one of the strengths of using GitHub and using these sorts of community-based tools and projects is that you're able to accelerate your automation, accelerate how you're doing builds and automated builds really quickly by taking in projects that other people have done. The problem is that people are bringing these projects into really sensitive parts of their supply chain. And there isn't necessarily the due care and attention that there is when these systems are, let's say, more internally or more private or more owned. So previously, I did a talk around quite an advanced and quite clever supply chain attack. If you're on the video, back to the videos about the XE exploit. But this was very, very straightforward. This was an account associated to the particular GitHub action projects that people were importing was compromised on someone's laptop, and then they uploaded some code to run, which run in 23,000 projects automation pipelines. So secure supply chain, I think, is people have been talking about that for years, about securing the supply chain, but I think there's going to be more and more talk around how, as an industry, do we standardize and create common tooling around this. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is that, there's KubeCon, and it was up there in Cloud Native Con in London here, April 1st to the 4th. It's going to be huge, absolutely ridiculously huge. I've seen all of the tracks, and it's just, there's so much content that's going to be generated over that time. The first day, they are co-hosting dozens and dozens of various open source technologies, are having their own mini conferences on the day. So I'll be there if you want to come. For those who can't make it, I'll present on the next Cloud Native News. I'll be presenting an extended version with the highlights. And also, if you're not attending, look out for fringe events, which won't cost the same as a second-hand car, which is what the tickets cost. Just to give you an idea, this is what KubeCon in 2015 looked like. I was there in San Francisco during that one. This was the main hall for people to mingle and network in, and this was it last year. So in terms of where the industry is shifting, where the technology is shifting, picture speaks volume. And back to Paul. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, it's showtime. Now, we were going to go straight into the showtime, but I understand we have to have a 5-minute break for Richard to set up, or can we just carry on? Yeah, we can just carry on. Okay, all right. Cool. Richard, are you ready to go? Awesome. We just swapping that. Oh, whoops, there you go. Swapping that to that.
Yeah, so we pop this one down on the...
There you go. It's all right. It's all right. Give me a chance. So, we'll say, give every frame a URL. We are very, very pleased to introduce Richard Cartwright from Media Anywhere, who is going to talk about their truly cloud-native ideas, their truly cloud-native interactions, APIs, open source stuff. It's all there, right, Richard?
Yeah.
Are we good to go?
Talking to this one, I'm just going to press magic buttons on slides. Hey, look at that.
Is audio all right? Okay, 1 second.
Okay. Yes, now you can hear me. Hello, everybody. Give every frame a URL. My name is Dr. Richard Cartwright, and yes, welcome to Cloud Native Media in March 2025. What am I going to be talking about? Well, what is Cloud Native brackets media? We've actually already had a very good explanation there from Paul, so let's see what I came into this thinking that it was and see if it matches. And I'm going to be talking about, I come very much from the broadcast world. I started my career at BBC R&D a long time ago. And so know a lot about the broadcast tech stack. But what happens if we go the other way around and we start from the cloud and we work backwards to media production? Okay, so that's the premise of this presentation. And one of the problems that we get if we do that is dealing with time, dealing with clocks, these really pesky things that we have to have if we want to synchronize our frames and we want to synchronize our audio and our video together. So let's think about time in terms of a metronome representation or counting or an hourglass. And then I'll be talking about the technology stack that we're putting together as a company. It all starts with a frame. I think there's a clue in the title where we might be going with that. I'll try and do a quick demo as much as I can in this environment. And then what can we build if we give every frame a URL? What can we build with that? I'm going to talk about a media mesh concept and how we don't want to build that ourselves. We want to work with others on that and some conclusions. So who the hell am I? I'm Dr. Richard Cartwright. I am co-founder of Media Anywhere, which is a company that started just over a year ago. My other co-founders are James Kane, who was previously at Grass Valley, and Peter Bruggink, who was CTO of NEP in the Netherlands. I've got a PhD in computer science. I haven't touched many SDI cables in my life, but I do know a little bit about writing some computer code. I've previously been the technical steering committee chairman of the Advanced Media Workflow Association, as it's tried to specify things like AAF and MXF and the beginning of NMOS. Today. So let's get into it. What is cloud native media? I don't expect you to read this slide. I'm just putting up an example of what cloud infrastructure might look like. And this is what my DevOps guy drew when he drew out the infrastructure of our system. So let's just describe some of the things that are on this diagram. I've got object storage. I provision with Terraform. I've got containers, virtual compute. I'm accessing everything over HTTP. I'm using DNS to find things. So this is just characteristics of running infrastructure in the cloud. I'm using a virtual private cloud with load balancing. I've got private subnets. I'm using availability zones to make sure that everything's reliable and resilience. I can use identity, single sign-on management, and zero. All kinds of different applications that work on the web. But how does media fit into this? Okay, what's even more cloud native than that? Anybody? We could go serverless. We could start using Lambda functions and API gateways sitting on S3 buckets with event bridges, and can't even remember what that other icon is. Apologies, by the way, for using the AWS icons. Obviously, I have been on the psychological adaptation course of the training at AWS, so I can't do anything other than use AWS icons. It's a problem. Or there's another kind of thing that the cloud offers us. It's media services. So the transcode, the API gateway, which Paul was already talking about, Media Live. Or we have the AI services that allow you to do transcription or recognition. So the cloud offers us not just the ability to build infrastructure. We can also go serverless, or we can use services that enable us to do more things without having to start from scratch ourselves. Okay, so what's the state of the media industry? In production and broadcast, once again, that's the place I'm coming through. I'm not talking about the YouTube world, okay? That's a different, they've fixed a lot of stuff already. But you have these applications like Premiere Pro. They're 30, 35 years old, code bases. They tend to rely on having a local file system near to them so that they work. They make the assumption that the files are close to them. So what people have started to do is to move some of those files onto S3 buckets. So when they want to start an editing job, they will, first of all, either they'll go and get some files that they need from those buckets, copy them to a local file system, do the work, make a new asset, write it back to the cloud storage. What happens if we want to run the same thing on the cloud? Oh, well, we can run up Premiere Pro in the cloud on an EC2 instance with a big fat GPU and pay a big fat bill. And we can connect to that with a remote desktop like Amazon DCV, which is good, but it's not the same as having the application running locally because it's encoding and decoding the video and adds latency and so on. Surprisingly good considering, but I still have to then have a filing system in the way if I want to access those files, because Premiere assumes that those files are local. It doesn't connect directly to an S3 bucket. So I've got to do all the work of moving the files from the S3 bucket onto some filing system before I can edit with them. Now, I've used Premiere, but this could be all kinds of broadcast applications that are currently just lifting and shifting into the cloud. They've not been re-engineered to be cloud native. So I'm going to go into a bit of philosophy and then have a look at some thinking that I have about how we could do better than that. I think the clue's in the title of the talk. But let's start with a bit of philosophy. There's an amazing presentation on YouTube by Professor Michael Lee Wesher from Kansas State University called Information Revolution. It's actually really old, it's really bad quality, but what he does is he compares the difference between Encyclopedia Britannica and a wiki, Wikipedia specifically, and all kinds of other tools, information on paper versus information in a digital form. And he says that we must rethink information beyond material constraints if we're going to make the best use of the internet technology that we've been given. And I'm not sure we've quite got there with media yet. We've always been the case that we took film and we turned it into files. We took tapes and we turned them into files. We took a signal and we turned it into 2110. But did we actually solve any problems by doing that? Did we actually move forward? It's an open question, right? What kind of things are we talking about there? Well, I think the material constraints that we have are physical buildings, cable lengths of SDI, how much CPU or GPU do you have, and clocks I'm going to be talking about in a second. Another quote from Andy Woodhouse, who was a lecturer at BBC Wood Norton. There may be a couple of people in the room who remember going to Andy's lectures. But he would always include in his course the quote that the speed of light is too slow. And this is a common problem, right? We might be able to go beyond the material constraints, but the physical constraint is that light and therefore signals propagating along a wire can only go at the speed of light. So we do have a physical constraint in our world, but computers and distributed compute are so fast now that surely that should be the only physical constraint that we're hitting. And if we're introducing other constraints, then I think we should be questioning that. And finally, a really nice gentleman called Chuck Mayer, who was originally at Atari. He was right there at Atari when the game console was being developed, but ended up as I can't remember, Chief Innovation Officer at Grass Valley, and is now retired. But he was always talk about eigenvectors and eigenvalues and the de minimis form, and nobody had a clue what he was talking about. But I think that what he was talking about, de minimis form, is like the lowest common denominator, a threshold at which we found an interoperability point that is just good enough that we can do all kinds of interoperation, but isn't too complicated and isn't exposing your underpants to the world, basically. So it's finding. I've done lots of work on lowest common denominators over the years, And finding the one that is good enough is a real challenge. So I'm going to propose one coming up, and you can have your own opinion on it. So, material constraint. Let's think about time and clocks. One representation of a clock is a metronome. Tick, tock, tick, tock, tick. And in broadcast infrastructure, traditionally, we would time everything to a black and burst signal, and we'd have frame syncs, and it's tick, tock, tick. The problem with that is that if you're in two different places, separated by some distance, the speed of light is too slow, and so you've got these metronomes, ticking away, and so to actually make meaningful understanding of a signal, you've got to be able to synchronize that time representation. And my partner reminded me of an example that she got when she was doing BBC training and development, was that the annual Viennese Waltz concert from Vienna used to be simulcast. Anybody remember simulcast? Right, so simulcast is when you had television and FM radio, so that you could watch an orchestra performing, for example, and hear it in stereo, right? And because there weren't all the horrible digital delays there are in the system now, it worked. But they had to have someone on stage at the beginning of the concert clapping away, so that they could sync the video and the audio together. The problem is that one year they got that wrong, and they synced to the wrong clap. So then they had to introduce the pattern of, okay, the clap has to change, the clap has to be clap, 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 right? Because that's the only way that they could actually make sure that when they tuned in the delay between the video and the audio, that it was correct. So I'm just making the point that we often, we've introduced things like PTP clocks, and they're good at the edge where everybody can see the same clock, but in the middle, as we go to the cloud and stuff, it becomes a little bit more woolly. So what's the alternative? Well, we can count. Okay, so rather than considering a clock as a metronome, which is synchronous, we can start to use counters, and then we can use asynchronous processing, and we just count up. Now, so metronome's a problem, counters good. Counters therefore can become part of a URL. See where I'm going. Now, does anybody know, I did hint at a few people, where this counter came from? I took the picture of it yesterday. Okay, anybody? I'm not expecting you to know necessarily. What's that? Back to the Future. It's from a Moviola, which is a video editing or a film editing platform from 1924. I took this picture at CBC Toronto yesterday, which they've got in their museum there. So this was the way that they were editing, right? They had a time count and a frame count, and that's the way that they were working out how to do their video editing over reels of film. Okay, so it's not a new idea. Okay. So let's think about another kind of way of representing time. Now, some of you might have heard of the JTNM reference architecture and the use of grains as a means of moving things around. Oh, look, an hourglass has got grains inside it. So Ed's going, oh, God. But here we are. Has anybody heard of the hourglass pattern? It's a computer science pattern. So what it is if I write a lot of Rust code, but I'd like somebody to use that from Python. Or I've got a library that's in C or C++, and I want to use it from Node.js. Or I've got some C++, and I want to use it from some C++, but I've got different compilers. Okay, then how am I going to do that? Well, the answer to that in the hourglass pattern is I'm going to use the C programming language. Because the C programming language is an international standard that specifies not just the programming language, but how the bits and bytes get laid out in memory. Okay? So it means that it becomes an ideal place to do foreign function interfaces between different programming languages. Which means that I can take the same codes and libraries, and I can mix and match the different programming languages that I want to use. Now, there are other ways of doing foreign function interfaces, but this hourglass pattern is a well-established way. For example, if I want to build something using the NDI libraries in Rust, then I get the .h file, I create a binding, and I can then link to the NDI code. Hourglasses aren't just found here. There's an hourglass in AWS that exists between the engineering function and the customer function. You could think of the web libraries as being like an hourglass. Node, JavaScript, not Node, JavaScript, ECMAScript, and all the web libraries. They're sort of an interoperability point between all servers and all browsers. So that you've got this sort of point of interoperability. So let's have a look at this in terms of media production. So I might have live workflows where I've got cameras, SDI, NDI, SRT, transport stream, and I want to get that into applications, or live applications, or I want to mix or route or do graphics or capture or view. So that's the live silo. The production silo, where I have files like MOV or MXF or WAV, MP4, and I want to get them into an editor or a replay engine or an effects engine, or I want to do some color work on that. Or I'm trying to deliver some content. So I might have an AS11 file, MXF file in the format suitable for delivery. Or I need to create some HLS trunks or some transport stream or some CMAF or some RTMP. And I need to get those out to a CDN or a browser or a television or a mobile phone, or actually just get them into the archive. So what I'm suggesting, and I'm not suggesting that this is like as good as an international standard like the C library or anything like that, don't take that. This is just Richard is suggesting, why don't we consider giving every frame a URL and making that the interoperability point between these different layers in our technology stack. And moreover, what should we carry on those URLs? Well, we have an amazing Swiss Army knife already in the media industry, and that's FFmpeg. And it has not just the command line, but the libraries, the programming libraries of FFmpeg already have a set of data models that allow us to interchange things within a computer program. So why not expose those data structures out onto the wire so that we can build distributed compute applications over those things. So we give every frame a URL, and we use data structures that we already find in the wild in open source. And then we can add to FFmpeg, right? It's open source. That's the great thing about it. And then we can play the same trick, because we can start to say, well, I could start linking my live workflows with my browser. I could start getting MOV files and putting them in a mixer. I could start to do things that I can't easily do today. And obviously, you can keep flipping the hourglass around. And every frame as a URL is allowing me to change the color and the size of the grains, because it's REST. It's representational state transformation. And because we've done that, we've got URLs. So we've got the internet, and we've got DNS, and we've got all the other wonderful tools of the internet. So I can start to think about having things in different places. So I don't have to have my editor in the same place as my content anymore. I can start to think about having my content stored on S3 and editing it directly from within Premiere. Which is the demo I'm going to have showing you in a second. I can also think about things, each individual frame doesn't necessarily have to travel over the same path. Or frames, you might deliberately send things multiple times to make sure that they arrive. Okay, so we have the ability to use web technology stack to create resilience over distance. And then I can add some compute in the path. I can use proxy-like technology to transform the frames on the fly. I could make an adaptive bitrate version of something, or I could put an overlay on something to say who was using it and when, and protect it. All kinds of processing functions that can then be put on the path of the media as it travels, just using web server technology. And finally, oh look, I could start thinking about using this technology, every frame as a URL, to build a set of Lambda functions, API gateways, connect to transcribe services, use Elasticache, RAM cache, auto-scaling groups, load balancing. It all starts to work for our media frame by frame if we choose this approach. We fit in with that cloud-native infrastructure. So, apologies that this is obviously a slide from our marketing deck, but this is the product that we put together as a minimal viable product in the time that we've been going as a little company. And we're going to access media. We're not going to download it. We're not going to copy it. We're not going to move it. In fact, I'm just going to do the demo because this is really the slide if the demo didn't work. The demo might not work, but... Okay, so I've got a Premiere Pro running. Sorry, this might be a bit small to see, but I'll talk it through. So in the left-hand corner, we have a prototype panel. A panel is a JavaScript, HTML JavaScript application that you write and then you can embed into Premiere. There's an SDK for doing that. And I'm connected here to 3 different servers, but the first 2 of interest. One is in London, and one is in Ohio, so in the AWS region. So the AWS London region and the AWS Ohio region. And then what I can see in there is some content. And so I'm going to click on one of those things, and it's actually an MP4 file that exists in a bucket in Ohio. And I'm going to say import to bin, and it pretty much instantly imports. And in fact, I can open it straight away, and then I can start to play it. We don't have any audio here this evening. And then I can start to scrub around. And I can do the JKL. I am not an editor. Go backwards. And then I can stab at individual frames. Okay, we seem to have be struggling from good old demo effect. Let me just try one that I had ready earlier. No, that's not going to work, is it? Let me open another clip, see if that works. Okay, I think Premiere. So, obviously in this environment, I don't really know what's going on with the Wi-Fi network and so on. So I'm going to have one more go. Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah. So let's start a new project. CNM2. Okay, so a new project. There's our panel. We'll try and import to bin. Okay. So here is a clip. I can play it. And what's happening there is every single frame has got a URL and is being pulled down. It's not just the video also has its own URL. And they're all being pulled down dynamically by our plugin. So Premiere is asking for us, give us an uncompressed frame. And then we're making a web request to our server. Our server is then making a request to S3. S3 is coming back with a video. And then we're sending it to Premiere, decompressing it underneath Premiere. And Premiere then gets an uncompressed frame. So Premiere doesn't really know where any of this is coming from. If I stab around in here, I'm only pulling that one frame. And I'm only paying the egress charge for pulling that one frame. And I can scrub around in there as well. I can set an in point and an out point. And then I can pull that down onto a timeline. Okay, so I've now got a clip on my timeline. Now I'm going to go to Ohio. And I've got the open source movie Tears of Steel. Import that to bin. And then double click on that to open it. And hit play. So I'm now playing frames using URLs from Ohio over the Atlantic to here. And that's also working. Now, if I stop that and I start stabbing around, click, click. There's a delay, right? Because the speed of light is too slow. But it doesn't mean that I can't use it. And one of the reasons for that is that when we hit play in Premiere, it just asks us straight away for 50 frames. It says, give me 50 frames now. So we make 50 parallel requests to our server, which makes 50 parallel requests to S3, which returns in parallel 50 frames. So we're overcoming the latency issue by going massively in parallel. And that's one of the real powers of this URL approach. So I will take an in point, an out point, put that onto the timeline. Okay, and then I can play from London, and now I'm playing from Ohio. And Premiere doesn't know that, right? It's completely immune to that. And then, of course, the final trick is I can create a video effect. I can find a dissolve here. I think it's this one. Take a crossfade. Drop it on, didn't work. Okay, I don't know why that's not working. There we go. So I can play through that fade, and that just works, right? Because we fooled Premiere into thinking that both of these streams are local on this laptop, but actually they're not. They're over there in the cloud. Okay, back to presentation. So how does this work? We have a media API. Not quite sure how we're doing on time, Paul. Probably right. Yeah, keep going. So we have an API, and our plan is to share that on our website, and then we may also add some open source tools after that. But as we say, ultimately, it's all built on top of FFmpeg. We expose the structures of FFmpeg as source flows, renditions, and grains, which maps us to the JTNM reference architecture. And we can also cope with encoded media and raw media. And we also have a model for managing GOPs, because when we've got long GOP material, we need to know, okay, well, you want to play this frame, but actually you need to play this iframe first. So we understand that through the API as well. So what does access to your media look like? Well, you have some kind of server, and then you give your file name in your bucket, and then you ask for source.json or grain.json or whatever you need, and that's exactly how Premiere was talking to our server. And something you can look at on the stream afterwards maybe, but here's some examples of what the JSON looks like. It is just the data structures of FFmpeg mapped through into JSON, which you can actually do with the ffprobe command as well. So we've just followed the same, pretty much the same model that's used there. So sources, flows, renditions describe the codec, and so when we need to set up a codec inside Premiere, then we use the rendition.json to be able to do that. And finally, each grain has got some information, which includes its time base, its duration, position in the source file, its size in the source file, whether it's a keyframe or not. And that's how the API works, and it's a read and a write API, right? So you can both read out of it and write into it. How do we build these processing nodes in the middle that transform things? Well, let's say you've got a player and it's got some kind of control handle on it. We link that control handle through to a RAM cache database. So that as the control handle position is moving backwards and forwards, that's updating. And then when we want to get frame 41, the mixer and the graphics engine go and get the control information from the database. They then go and get the source material, the graphics engine does its thing, the mixer does its thing, and frame 41 is then returned back to the player. But all of these things are stateless, so they could be coming from different computers. It doesn't matter. And we can go massively in parallel. So we can start working on frames 42 and 43 before frame 41 is finished. So in this way, we're getting rid of the clock, we're getting rid of the metronome, and we're embracing the power of going parallel, distributed, and asynchronous. And this is the vision of what we want to build. which is a mesh of things that take in existing formats, the 2110s, the SDIs, the NDIs, and so on. And then they turn them from that synchronous world into the asynchronous world. We'll use some kind of RAM cache across the bottom of that, so that we can then go into edit, we can go into review, and we can control. And more than anything, I think it's time to move as much as possible of this to the web browser. Because the web browser now has amazing color, it has amazing processing power through WASM, it's got amazing GPU power through WebGPU. It's time to start building applications in the web, because the power is finally, really just literally color was fixed in the summer. It's time to start thinking about doing that and getting all the benefits of not having to install software and going cloud-based. And then we can play, protect, do graphics, filter, transform, all the things we need to do to make programs and get them out the door to all the different platforms we need to get them to. So, in conclusion, why don't we give every frame a URL? Why don't we work backwards from cloud-native web concepts to media, rather than trying to lift and shift the world that we've got today and push it forward into a world which isn't necessarily that friendly to it, maybe I'll say. Why not start thinking more about frames and timestamps, and less about the bytes and the metronomes? Because so many things that we do are very brittle to a byte changing or clocks. They don't work well in asynchronous infrastructures. Is every frame as a URL a simple enough but a good enough lowest common denominator point of interoperability for live and production and delivery and archive? And then we get this whole cloud, ground, cloud, cloud. People are trying to write specifications for this stuff. But we have a thing called the web, and if we use URLs, and obviously you've got to choose the right codecs and the right bit rates. We don't get away from that problem, but we do have a unifying mechanism to do all these different connections, and even camera to cloud. Some manufacturers are starting to get interested in the concept of using an asynchronous API like this to get signals from a camera multipath into the cloud. And then we have the concept of mesh processing that scales just like the web. We can all have auto-scaling groups. We're using containers with all that good stuff. Maybe even move to Lambda functions going forward. And then exploit the benefits of browser-based workflows more and more, because the technology in the browser is, quite frankly, becoming pretty amazing. So, that's it. It all starts with a single frame. We're starting with remote editing, including Premiere Pro. The next thing is the media mesh, enabling browser workflows, publishing our own API. And then in the future, we'll see that connecting AI and personalization to this is a future step. But that's where I am. That's my details. Thank you very much. And any questions?
I'm going to dive in here and say, if you've got questions, that's great. Can you save them for Richard in the pub? Are you coming to the pub?
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. Because we are running a little bit late, and if we start doing questions, we'll be here all night, and we've got to be out of this venue by 9 o'clock. So, David and I are going to have a little talk about the state of the world and where we're going. I'm going to go first, and then David's going to pick up. So, without further ado, should we get moving? The challenge. The challenge is palpable. I might put this down. I might put this down and use this one. Yeah, let's do that. Give me a little bit more. Yeah, a little bit more slack. Right. So, the challenge is palpable. Look at it. This was from the DPP leaders briefing. Who went to the DPP leaders briefing? Yeah. So you saw this stuff. I mean, look, we've got a big chunk of things there, and we've got a bit of a trend going towards the corner, right? And then there's this one thing at the top that says AI, right? Spoilers. we're not going to talk about AI today. I know you're disappointed because everybody loves. You don't get to hear about AI in very many places at the moment, do you? So we're not going to talk about AI, but we're going to talk about these things. Apart from AI, these were the things that came out of the DPP summit as the top stuff: operational effectiveness, business change, business innovation, efficiency, collaboration, value proposition, customer experience. And I scratched my head for ages thinking, oh, how can I sum all of that up? And then I got to, I want it all, I want it all, I want it all, and I want it now, was kind of my summary of that. It is a veritable wish list of stuff that people just want, right? So as Freddie Mercury said, he wants it all. The market wants it all. So it's not just our bosses that want it all, it's the market that wants it all. The market is demanding it all. But how are we going to deliver it all? So this is going to be harder than we thought, isn't it? Because it's not just about business as usual. It's not just about carrying on and doing things a little bit better. This stuff is really just ripping things up and being a bit radical about how we change the state of what we do and how we do it. So I'm going to talk about some of the things, and just going back to this, it's like what's out there that we can learn from. So I'm going to talk about some of the things that I think are interesting that we can learn from, and then David's going to talk about some other things that he thinks we can learn from this. So the Innovator's Dilemma is it's a book that was written in the 90s. It's a very well-known business book. Who's heard of the Innovator's Dilemma? Yeah, a few people. It's a good read. It's full of examples of this. But I'm going to sum it up in my way, which is probably a little bit simplistic because it's a complex book. I thoroughly recommend going and reading it. But what we say with the Innovator's Dilemma is, if we do a new thing, it's going to take revenue away from our business. That's the starting point, right? So who's heard that in their businesses? I think people have heard that. But if we go and do that, it'll just erode what we currently do. So the answer to that is, well, if we don't do that, then somebody else is going to do it for us, and then that's still going to take away our revenue. So we're still going to be in trouble. So what's the next thing that normally comes after that? The next thing that normally comes after that is, all right, well, let's just do the new thing, but we can do it in the same way as we did the old thing, right? Or the other things we do. We'll just do everything the same way. We can leverage our brand. We can be the organization we've always been. We just have to do the new thing as well. So who's heard that? I bet a few people have heard that in their organizations. But of course, the main benefit of doing the new thing, the innovation, is that you don't do it in the same way. You're going to do it differently. So this situation has played out through history, and the book is full of some amazing examples going back to bulldozers in the 1950s, hard disks in the 1980s, steel mills. I mean, it's across the spectrum. And since the book has been written, it's played out many times. So you might have heard of a company called Kodak, right? Right? They used to make cameras. They came along. Somebody in their research department came along. Oh, you should get into digital cameras. And of course, management went, oh yeah, that'll take away our revenue. We don't want to do that. We make money out of films. And so this played out exactly as foretold for Kodak. And now Kodak is, hey, a brand that gets licensed maybe once in a blue moon. And so we can go and look at these other examples. We can look at Ryanair as a disruptor coming into the airline industry. We can look at Blockbuster. We can look at BlackBerry. We can look at Nokia. We can look at all of these examples, and in some way or another, they all follow the Innovator's Dilemma. And the Innovator's Dilemma is really telling you that your business is facing an existential crisis if it gets disrupted from a new innovation that really makes ultimately your fundamental product cheaper, probably, or appeal to a new market. So the Innovator's Dilemma is really interesting. I thoroughly recommend going and finding out more about it. Number two, I'm going to talk about Conway's Law. Who's heard of Conway's Law? Yeah. Conway's Law is, I think, something that is not as widely known or understood as it really should be, because it dates back to 1967. Melvin Conway in 1967 said he took off the lid of an IBM mainframe and could trace the org chart of IBM on the circuit board, right? And the observation is, and again, this is played out through the intervening years, through the last 60 years almost, we have seen this time and time again. Organizations build systems, so whether that's hardware systems, software systems, other types of systems, they build systems that represent their communication structure, right? Their communication structure quite often is their org chart, but it doesn't have to be their org chart. If you just think about the org chart, that maybe isn't getting the full picture. You've got to think about communication structures. How do different teams communicate? How do different people in your organization communicate? And if that isn't structured in the way that you want to build your products, you're going to be disappointed. You're going to have a problem. And so that's why we come up with the reverse Conway maneuver. So that's what somebody called the reverse Conway maneuver, is structuring an organization around the technical design, around an architecture. So, we say with that, maybe it ain't what we do, it's the way that we do it, right? Because actually, everyone can still do the same jobs. It's just that the way they communicate, the way the organization is structured, that can actually affect the thing that you end up building. And number 3, and I apologize right in advance, this is the most complicated one, so I'll try and rattle through it. But this is about changing big businesses. And Craig Larman is a guy who he's the co-creator of LESS, which is the large-scale Scrum, which is one of those Scrum, esoteric Scrum things, which I won't go into, but it's wisdom. So it's about how organizations behave when you try and change them. And number 1 is that organizations are implicitly optimized not to change, right? They are run by people who want to protect their jobs, right? Especially people who are in those mid to high level management positions. And 2, any change initiative will, to support that, really be co-opted by by those positions and overloaded to try and basically mean the same as the status quo. So it's basically trying to say, effectively, and look, we're not pointing the finger at individuals here. We're just saying culturally, the organisation likes to go, oh yeah, there's a change, but there isn't, right? See, there you go. You already know it's true. And number 3 is that any change initiative will be derided as puritanical, as religion, needing customization for local concerns. Oh, but we're different from that. We can't do things that way. We're special, right? Who's heard that? Bet a lot of you have, right? And so these things all interlink. And what happens is after changing the change, if some managers and some power structures are still displaced, they become coaches and trainers for the change, giving management the impression that the change is done, after which they become industry consultants. And so the message of all of this, this all comes up to the 5th law is, in large organizations, culture follows structure. So it's about how you structure organizations. Back to that Conway's law thing of the communication structures of your organization that affect what your culture is and how things can really change. And look, Larman in his laws offers a lot of observations, which I can tell by the laughs. You know, some of you are recognizing, some of it resonates with you. But I must admit, Craig Larman does not offer any solutions. But I would say that knowing that these are things that happen in large organizations is already a solution when you're going in there thinking, well, we really need to change stuff. And then I think if you're aware of these things, suddenly you're informed and you can think, okay, maybe we need to approach this a bit differently. Maybe we need to look out for these things and try and mitigate them from happening. So I'm nearly done, and I'm going to hand over to David shortly. But there's 3 books here that I would thoroughly recommend. And another spoiler, I haven't read any of them. To be fair, I've read part of Sooner Safer Happier, which is a great book, and the author Jonathan Smart, he's got YouTube videos which are incredibly funny about transformations and really parodying how transformations go. But these are 3 amazing books. So Simon Sinek, Start With Why. He's got this thing called the Golden Circle, where he's go why, what, how, and there's a lot of narrative about it. There's a lot of people who don't agree with it. But I think fundamentally, some of that disagreement is misunderstanding, because fundamentally, it's a book about marketing, right? The Start With Why is a how you sell ideas to people, right? And obviously, that's about how you sell physical products to people. But it can also be about how you sell ideas within your organization. New ideas. Start with why, right? It's a great concept. There's a TED talk on it as well. I think you've watched, and all kinds of stuff. Team topologies. Okay, this is really Matthew Skelton, who is local to London. He has written this book, and it's all about how you actually structure organisations and solve that Conway's law problem, right? And spoiler, he doesn't recommend matrix structures, right? And then Sooner, Safer, Happier. Well, that is at the moment, I think, the Bible for a lot of people on how to actually do agile and be agile without just following the Scrum protocols. All right, so in summary, I've got a playlist. So I really have got a playlist. So I Want It All, Queen. Changes, David Bowie. It Ain't What You Do, It's the Way That You Do It, Funboy 3. Another Brick in the Wall, Pink Floyd. Because I guess all those Lahmann's laws, they feel like bricks in a big wall that's stopping you from doing stuff, right? Don't Stop Believing. Walls come tumbling down if you don't stop believing. If you had another brick, it's a sequence. And then, finally, of course, You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet. Bachman Turner Overdrive. Let's rock! And with that, you can scan. That's actually a Spotify playlist. If you want to take it away and listen to it, thank you very much. Over to David. And the Spotify playlist will be in the description. Thank you very much. Yep, you got it. Oh, you can't use that there.
No, it's fine. Just there you go.
Cool.
Let me just test something. I think I'll grab this. So Paul's left me 2 minutes to do my presentation. You ain't seen nothing yet because I've literally got 2 minutes to do it in. Okay, let's see if this works. Exactly, thank you. There you go. So I'm pretty much be able to get this slide and then I'm done. So this is an About Me talk. A worryingly long 25 years experience. That really hurt when I wrote that down. I've done everything from desktop support to global enterprise systems architecture work. I'm a director and a founder of LiveWire, which you heard about earlier on. We've been delivering operational excellence for over 13 years. Again, really difficult writing that number down as well. And at the moment, we're primarily focused on building teams and infrastructure as product. And that's the end of my talk. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. So first of all, this is a lie. We start off with 5 questions, but really it's just a lead off questions I'll be asking. Not so your hardware 24/7. Do you drive your processes with manual implementation or do you drive them with automation? How much of your infrastructure is defined as code? Does your infrastructure have APIs? Do your applications sit on top of your infrastructure or do they interact with your infrastructure? Do you monitor trends or do you look at static points of failure or success? Has your business transitioned from one to the other without necessarily engaging with that new landscape? So the point of this really is a simple awareness of this fact can fundamentally shift an organization on how it's going to look going forward. Because a number of organizations may see themselves as being dynamic, but they're built on static principles. And there are some very fine, very good companies who have static or built on static technology, but for some reason see themselves as dynamic infrastructure companies. So next, are your technology investments focused on innovation or maintenance? So is your technology stack the cost of doing business, or is it an innovation which drives your business? You know, how is your organization balancing the costs between the two, if at all? You know, are you relying upon a cloud provider to provide innovation, or are you innovating on top of a cloud provider's offering? You know, are you looking at technology choices to simply reduce your hardware and staff costs? You know, companies need to ensure that their technology investment focused is aligned to question one, because a lot of the times it's not. They see themselves as dynamic, innovative businesses, but where they put their money is purely in maintenance and not in that innovation. It's fun, isn't it? So, another big point that Paul was raising a number of times is this, is your management a team aligned to these answers? So again, you can declare this, you can say this, right? But is that actually a reality? So for instance, like we've all seen businesses, multiple industries with excellent product representation. Cloud enabled, you got it. One-click automation installed, no problem, right? But we all know some businesses, if you were to scratch under the surface just a little bit, you know, it's still managed internally as if they're writing a setup.exe file to a CD, giving it to an engineer who then gets on a train to Leicester, you know. And for those who don't know what a CD is, it was the thing that came before DVDs. And for those who don't know what a DVD is, it was the thing that came before Blu-ray. And if you don't know what Blu-ray is, put the beer down. So what a business projects as their delivered product versus how they're structured to deliver the product can be two fundamentally different things, right? And so companies need to be aware of this dual reality drag factor, you know, where management incentives and structures have not caught up to ensure it's aligned with what's actually happening. So next. So are your technical teams aligned with these answers? You know, for static infrastructure, you know, we had a common pattern. You know, we would design, build, install, test, maintain, test. We'd have an endpoint post-delivery where we could fix things and improve things, right? But with more product-focused dynamic infrastructure, this is not necessarily the case anymore. You know, you rarely have a post-deployment event where you can retest, improve, reduce toil. You know, are your teams testing for failure? Or are they, you know, do they work within failure scenarios? Or are they put into a bubble where they're being driven to build new features, new integrations, all within it will always work within the cloud bubble, you know? So like in a dynamic infrastructure, testing, refactoring, tool reduction need to be integrated as part of the work, right? As opposed to it being this thing that we're going to be put off at this mythical endpoint that never comes. And to summarize all this is like, do you have the culture to sustain these answers? And it was something that Paul mentioned, and it was something that was put on the screen, the idea of culture is essential to this. It's like a story I tell around this is back in 2006, yes, 2006. My boss at the time, he came in and he had one of those suave directors or business monthly magazines that they sent out to all of the business owners. And he throws down a magazine on the table in front of me, center spread, and it's about this new thing called Amazon Web Services. And it went into great detail how Amazon had turned their business from selling books, or they were still selling books, but they suddenly invented this thing called AWS, and how it was going to revolutionize how people build infrastructure and reduce costs and do all these things. And he looked at it and he says, can we use this? Can this save us money? But we now know, the question he should have been asking is, how did a business go from selling books to building Amazon Web Services in 3 years? 3 years. So businesses with a culture to innovate will continue to thrive, disrupt, and grow. Those simply asking, will this save us money, are asking the wrong question. Right. And on that happy note, I'll give everyone a summary. So, just to summarize, is the future foundation of your business built on static or dynamic technology? Are your technology investments focused on innovation or maintenance? Is your management team aligned with these answers? Is your technical teams aligned with answers? And the most important question of all really is, do you have the culture to sustain these answers? And with that, I'd like to thank you. And now we can all go to the pub. Thank you very much.
Hey! And before we go to the pub, I just wanted to say, I just want to trip over the wires yet again, because that seems to be the theme of the night, doesn't it? Thank you very much for coming. Big cheer for yourselves. And that's just a warm-up, because we really got to thank Comcast Technology Solutions for this amazing venue. We've got to thank Richard for his amazing talk on giving every frame a URL. And of course, David for that infinite wisdom on how to structure organizations and do the thing. And me for just tripping over wires. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment, all of that stuff. And we will see you next time, April the 30th. Somewhere connected to the AWS Summit in London around Excel. We will see. Watch this space for information about that. But in the meantime, those of you in the room, we will see you at the Craft Beer Co. in due course. And for those of you watching online, thank you very much and good night.